I'm a 23-year-old Italian male living in a town in southern Italy. It's not the most secure town in the world. In fact, we have a long history of microcrime connected to local mafia, but if you are smart, you can keep yourself out of trouble. I live in the old part of town. In Italy, it is common for every town to be built around the old part, and after an earthquake in 1980 destroyed a large part of it, it became very affordable to live here. Some parts are beautiful and well kept, whereas other parts aren't so much, so you find good families and great folk sharing spaces with more undesirable people. It doesn't help that the town's castle has been converted into a prison, but luckily for only minor offenders. Now the encounter itself. It happened just this January. I came back one evening from uni. It's a 20-minute drive in the car, but with useless public transport it can take up to an hour and a half to get home, and as I like to study in the library until it closes at 6 p.m, I usually come home at 8 or later. When I get home, I get greeted by my beautiful 1-year-old lab called Maya, who is a total sweetheart, and I take her out for a walk around her favourite parts of town, which is the castle. Whilst there, she meets dogs that live on the streets and get fed by people who live in that area. She was taking longer than usual to do her business, and I was freezing since I was wearing lighter clothing than I should. Plus it was snowing, which is very rare here, and this was the first time Maya had seen snow, so she was excited. For that reason, I decided to walk back home and grab a jacket so I could enjoy the occasion. To cut my journey short, I have to pass an abandoned building that is under construction. It has just the pillars and floors done, and a lot of kids would go and play there. As I walk towards it, I see this guy standing there, his back facing me, standing still like a rock. He was looking up at the first floor of this derelict building, wearing a dirty beanie hat, heavy winter jacket, and a tracksuit too wide for his build. It wasn't an extraordinary encounter, as there are a lot of weird people about, so I decide to carry on my journey. Suddenly, Maya had her hackles raised and her sight locked onto this guy. My first red alert started flashing. She never did this. As we walked towards him, Maya started growling in a low-pitched growl that made this guy turn around. I have never seen this man before, and my God, his face, it was so creepy, and his hair was so greasy. He extended his hand to Maya. "Hey doggy, how cute are you?" Stupidly, that calmed me down a little. Maybe he was mentally ill and out for a walk. I know some of them around here, as there is a hospital for the mentally ill, and they all bared resemblance to this guy. When he was trying to pet my dog, I heard something coming from the first floor of the derelict building that this man had been so interested in. I thought at first it may have been a cat, but no, Maya would have been going crazy trying to chase it. I then look up and I see a little girl, around 10 years old. She had only fear in her eyes, wide open, really desperate. She had a familiar face though. Must have been one of the kids that play around this building. I must have had a familiar face to her too, because as soon as she saw me and Maya, she caught my eyes and tried to whisper the words, "Help." I turned to see this creep was now staring at me. He had a very serious look on his face, a creepy smile, and was looking dead into my eyes. I didn't know what to do. I'm 6'2" and kind of imposing, I guess, but I've never fought anyone, and I'm really a peaceful guy. In a fraction of a second, this guy looks up again and says, "Come down, sweetie, we need to get home. The food will get cold." Yeah, right, totally believable. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I ask him. "I'm her uncle. I need to get her home to eat," he says with the most serious look I've ever seen. I was panicking and trying to think of what to say as an excuse to get her down myself, as I didn't trust this guy at all. Okay, here goes, I think to myself. That's strange, because I'm her uncle. This doesn't add up. At this point, the girl has the brilliance to lean over and say, "Hey uncle, can you help me get home? Mummy will get worried." Now this guy didn't feel threatening to me, just creepy, so I duck under the building to get the girl. As I prepare to grab her, Maya starts to growl at the creepy guy, then barks. When she usually barks, she has a cute feminine high-pitched tone, but with this guy it was completely different, totally out of character for Maya, and it scared me. At this point I turn around and notice this guy has his hand behind his back, appearing to reach for something. I think, oh shit, I'm no fighter, and if this guy has a knife, this is going to end badly. He stops his reaching motion as Maya's bark is continuous now. In the heat of the moment, the girl leans toward the edge of the building where she was standing, and I grabbed her with one arm, and the other keeping Maya at bay as a deterrent. As the girl was stepping down, I asked her if she had a phone. "No, I don't have it," she replied. She was on the brink of crying from fear, so as soon as her feet touched the ground, I unlocked my phone and gave it to her. She took it immediately and ran. My first thought was, if she did all this just to steal my phone, I'm going to be so pissed off. After all, it wouldn't have been unusual, but as I did tell her to take it, I don't think so. Anyway, the girl was gone with my phone, and I assumed getting help. I turn, and this guy has a knife in his hand. Not a little pocket knife, a big-ass kitchen knife. My flight mode kicks in, and I try to run away, but Maya had a different idea, and decides she wants to stand her ground with this maniac, and continues to bark at him. I couldn't pull her away as she's almost 30 kilograms, but even that was a grip too strong for her, so we were stalling, playing a game of tug-and-war. This guy is now swinging and waving his knife around in the air, trying to cut me. I want to run, but I'm not leaving my dog. She could end up being badly hurt, and if I did manage to pull her away, he could run after us. So in that moment, there we were, him taking swipes at us with his knife, my dog barking, me petrified, and on top of all that, my hands were freezing. Cold from gripping the leash, and not wearing gloves was really starting to hurt. The thing that still surprises me the most in this situation is the fact that I'm absolutely sure people living around the block would have been able to hear everything, but not one single person so much as took a look out their window. After what seemed like forever, but was probably only 2 minutes, I hear heavy footsteps coming from the street behind me. There was a group of people armed with baseball bats. I'd a guess it was the girl's father and other relatives. This isn't going to end well, I thought. As soon as the creep saw those men marching towards him, he threw the knife in my direction, luckily missing me, and started to run away. It all happened so quickly I was still reeling from the knife being thrown at me, so was unable to react in time to block him. But Maya jumped into action, biting his leg and ripping a piece of his tracksuit clean off with her teeth. The creep didn't flinch and ran for his life with the group of men pursuing him. He managed to lose them and disappeared. The girl's father came to me. I thought to thank me, but instead started screaming at me. "Who was that guy, huh?" waving his bat around. The girl was begging for him to calm down, but it only seemed to make things worse. Eventually she told him that I was actually helping her. She gave me my phone back, and the father calmed down. He apologized, thanked me for helping his daughter, and offered me a coffee at his house. Exhausted, I politely refused, decided I'd had enough for one night, and went home. The next morning the police came by my house to take a statement, but nothing ever came of it. I didn't do the best I could have, but I'm glad I helped that little girl. I don't know what would have happened to her if I'd not been there. Maya still has the piece of torn tracksuit she ripped from his leg. It's one of her favorite toys now. So creepy uncle wannabe guy, let's not meet again. I have been a long-time lurker, and I just thought I'd share my experience. I live in a small coastal village. Often on a Sunday morning, my husband, our 2 children, and I will take our 2 dogs for a walk along the beach. We drove home and parked up our car in the car park. We have to walk about 300 meters through a caravan park to reach the beach. It was an easy walk, and walked for about 30 minutes before turning around and starting to make our way back. The children were having fun skimming stones on the calm sea, and the dogs were having a run. Once the children and dogs had had enough, we decided to make our way back to the car. We had left the beach and were heading back through the caravan park. I noticed I had a cut on my finger from picking up a sharp stone when I was picking stones for the children to use for skimming. I said that I'd quickly pop back to the car to get a plaster. The children were still small, so their little legs would take a while, plus they didn't like to see me bleeding. I was not far from them at all. I'd say 25 to 50 meters at the most, when I heard my little boy and girl call out, "Mummy, Mummy, Mummy!" There was something in their little calls that sounded urgent. Hearing this, I stopped, and as I turned around, a large man almost bumped straight into me. I walked back to my husband and children, puzzled with why they had called me in the way they did. My husband said that the man who just nearly bumped into me walked past him and the children at quite a fast pace. Once he was in front of them, he dropped a large butcher's knife from his coat sleeve into his hand and was walking straight for me like he was about to grab me. When the children called me, he quickly pulled the knife back up into his sleeve and just walked off. My husband said he had seen what was just about to happen, so quickly told the children to call me because he didn't want to jump the man when he had a knife unless he needed to. We were all quite shocked with what had just happened. Even the children had seen the knife appear in the man's hand. When we got home, we contacted police, but the man was never found. Some backstory. Growing up, my parents would foster children. We had a group of kids living with us, and I became good friends at the time with one that was around my age. I don't feel right using his real name, so for now I will just call him Bud. Eventually, Bud was taken back to his family, and as time went on, we lost contact. Now for the story. In early 2008, I had turned 18 and decided I wanted to switch schools and move out of the same town I had been in forever. I was staying with a cousin in Rapid City, South Dakota, and had gotten word that Bud had committed suicide. I felt terrible after hearing this. I was in the basement of my cousin's aunt's house doing laundry and thinking about everything that had happened, but mostly about Bud and how terrible I felt that I wasn't there to talk to him and be a better friend. I never felt right in the basement there. You never quite felt alone. As I was thinking things over, I got mad. Mad at the idea that he would do something like that. Mad at myself, mad at the world. I picked up some of my laundry and in a rage I threw it across the room. I went upstairs and started watching TV with my cousin, his friends, and his aunt, who I'll call Carrie. Ever since I left the basement I felt uneasy, and Carrie could see that I was not acting my usual self, so she asked me what was wrong. I said nothing was wrong, and we all continued to watch TV until my cousin and his friends decided to go hang out in the back room. She asked me again what was wrong, so I started to tell her. I told her about what had happened with Bud, and who he was, and how I cared for him like family. I began to feel more and more uncomfortable as I told her what had happened. All the while she sat there listening and understanding, and all the while I get this intense feeling of being watched. I start to cry as I tell her I feel almost responsible for him committing suicide because I wasn't there for him as a friend or as a family member. The feeling of being watched is almost to the point of unbearable. As I dry my eyes, I ask her, "Do you ever get the feeling that you are being watched?" Her face of understanding and sorrow changed to fear, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. She yells, "Where?" I, almost in shock at her reaction, point towards the kitchen from where I felt the stare. She looks in the direction I am pointing, and just as soon as she looked, all hell broke loose. Dishes start flying, smashing into walls as if someone was in a furious rage. Doors on the cupboards fly open, and you could hear breaking glass. I am in total fear as I look at Carrie calmly going to a shelf to grab a box. She opens it and pulls out dried sage and a lighter and begins to fill the room with smoke from the plant. She walks towards the kitchen and everything starts to stop. She keeps walking through the house and opens the basement doors and almost seems to usher something back down the stairs. She then comes back in the room and asks me, "Are you okay?" I said, what the hell just happened? I assume my face had to be pale from the event that had just taken place. She informed me that what was living in the basement was a demon, and she has had to deal with it before. She tells me of one of her own foster kids that she had taken in, and had had an experience where the kid was attacked by this demon. I had met this boy, and he weighed maybe 95 pounds, very skinny, and when it attacked him it took 4 people to hold him down so they could perform some sort of exorcism on him. Apparently, when I was in the basement and through the laundry, this thing took notice that I was in a vulnerable state and was trying to attach itself to me. I don't know how to end this story, so I'll just end it with this. Please be careful out there and don't take the people you love for granted. I'm so glad I wasn't alone in this situation. This is one of the most disturbing things that I have ever heard about in my life. It is 100% true and is something that gives me the chills every time I think about it. I was visiting my mum this weekend. My 90-year-old grandma just moved in with her and we started talking about my grandpa's side of the family. He died before I was born, so I know next to nothing about his family. His siblings have all been dead for years as well. Anyway, my grandma was talking about his family and the different people she liked, how so-and-so was this and someone else was that. She commented on how different Susan looked from everyone else. My mum chimed in that Susan had been adopted and asked my grandma if she remembered that. My grandma got a strange look on her face and I asked what all that was about. My mum began to tell me that when my grandpa's sister had adopted Susan, she said one day the 15-year-old girl that lived at the pig farm next to their property just showed up at her house and gave her the baby, which was Susan. Turns out that the 15-year-old's mother had died years before and her father was always raping her. The girl had given birth twice, and each time her father made her take the newborns out to the hogs and feed the babies to them to hide the evidence of him raping his daughter. Sadly, the babies were still alive when he made her do this. The last baby that she had was Susan, and when she was born, the girl couldn't bring herself to kill another baby and took her to the neighbours, who was my great-aunt. She told her she needed her to keep the baby safe, and when she left was never seen again. I would like to think that the girl got away from her father and lived out a full, nice life. I know what happened to those babies was murder, but it seems to me the girl was a victim at the hands of that man as much as the babies. My mum asked me if I had remembered Susan from when I was a little girl, and we used to go to her house. I did, and I was in shock because I had no idea she was the person my mum was speaking of. This woman has since passed, but she has children and grandchildren. I started thinking about how they would have never existed if her birth mother hadn't had the courage to escape her rapist father and save her life.